Well, just want to start by thanking everybody for being on this presentation and being on time. We really appreciate everyone's desire to hear what we're talking about and evaluating Atlanta's proposed tree protection ordinance from Trees Atlanta's perspective. And just a little bit about myself. I've been at Trees Atlanta for over 25 years. My background is landscape architecture, and I'm a certified arborist. And before I worked at Trees Atlanta, I did work on tree recompense plans for Fulton County and the City of Atlanta at a landscape architecture firm, which is one of the reasons why I left, because it was pretty harsh seeing all those trees come down. Again, I want to thank you all for taking part in this exciting possibility of improving the tree ordinance. And we also have Judy Yee, who's our communications marketing director, who's been working very hard on this as well to figure out how the tree ordinance is moving and some improvements that we think need to be made.
So just to tee us up, as we begin, I'd like to briefly go over the agenda. And by the way, my name is Judy. I am Judy Yee. So thank you for joining us. The agenda for today is rather simple. We will start off with our overall evaluation of the tree protection ordinance from Trees Atlanta's perspective and offer what we think is the next step that we will embark on. We'll discuss our criteria for how we reach this evaluation. And most importantly, we'll spend a little bit of time discussing what we are calling an impact chart, which we created to develop a discussion framework. One of the challenges with this ordinance is that there's so many changes that it was overwhelming to be able to identify which part that we were analyzing and how to make an actionable next step for each. So we broke down the changes into 23 evaluations that are 23 standards that are going to be evaluated over the next 4 weeks. Today, we're not going to be able to address all 23. In fact, we'll be discussing 4, but we will be giving you a view of what we think that the flyover view or the big picture view looks like in our perspective. And that will be a main takeaway that's very important for the rest of the discussions. And lastly, as I noted, that we will go over some specific standards and our recommended changes, which will give you an indication of the tempo that we will go on for the next few weeks. So I'd like to discuss a few logistics for today. Because we are working against the city timeline, we have scheduled the webinars for the next 4 weeks, which seems a little hectic. But considering what we are going toward, we do need to keep to that tempo. For example, some of you who are very active in the MPU meeting cadence in your community might have noticed that in March and April, the MPUs have been asked to review the fee assessments related to this new ordinance. It is being sent to the MPU groups as a non-voting item for comment only. That's a bit of a technicality that runs in MPU meetings, but it just means that this is informational. They want to make sure that the public is aware that this text exists. And for most of you probably know that the body of the ordinance is available online. I'll be happy to share with you those links if you'd like, but hopefully these overviews will give you a good sense of what those details are. The next deadline is April 27th. The Community Development and Human Services Committee of the City Council are charged with looking at public comment and making any changes and amendments to the ordinance that's been submitted. So on by the 27th, that committee will have to send recommendations to the full City Council. We're hoping that we can send our recommended changes and amendments to the committee way in advance of that so they can review and consider. The big date to keep an eye out for is May 3rd, is when the city is currently scheduled to vote on the ordinance that has been submitted for consideration. So today in this webinar, The Q&A is open, and I do see one Q&A. I'll address it once I stop talking, but I will be keeping an eye in that box. Please do not use the chat because the topics can be rather complex, and it'll help us keep the conversation streamlined if you keep the comments and questions to the Q&A. And then lastly, I encourage you to send any additional language or specific recommendations to me at judy@treesatlanta.org, and please CC Greg if you'd like, but I will be managing those comments and collecting them all. So with that, those logistics, we're about to start with our webinar. And to start with our webinar, I would like to ask a question to kind of level set where this community is. If you could, please answer this question, which is, which ordinances have you read? This is a multiple choice question. Select all that apply. You have read the current city ordinance. You've read the new ordinance, or you've read another group's ordinance. Maybe you just read summaries of one or more of the versions, or maybe it's none of the above. So it will sit on that for a few more seconds. And then we will close the poll. And sorry if you don't get a chance to vote, but just to keep the webinar moving, I will end the poll in 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much. I'm ending the poll, and just to briefly show you where we are, looks like there, half of us have read one version or more, and a third of us have read none. So I'll stop sharing this results. And Greg, I will ask you to begin. Oh, actually, I lie. I did want to give you a peek into how we're dividing into the next 4 sessions. These are the 23 standards that we'll go over. I will not go over them specifically because you'll see these again and again throughout this webinar. But as you see, we broke up these standards to discuss in these sessions, partially because how they are related. And you'll notice that many of these standards are very interrelated. One touches another. And so we found that this might be the most sensible way to approach given the time constraints. Greg, you're on mute.
I just want to start off with letting everyone know that we do believe there's a path for this proposed ordinance to work. Now, we believe that there are amendments that do need to be made, but the basic guidelines, incentives, is that we believe it to be a good approach. We do feel like there are some amendments that need to be made, which we're going to go over the next 4 weeks. And we would love to see more field testing and support and pull the data out to see the results of 3 components. Does the new ordinance preserve more trees than the existing ordinance? What is the recompense changes from the old to the new ordinance? And of course, tree planting from the old to the new ordinance. Now, there are a lot of, as we go over this, there's a lot of interwoven components of the ordinance and a lot of nuances. So you may find that it doesn't always save as many trees as you would like, but then you expect recompense to go up and tree planting to go up. And in the end, Trees Atlanta is most interested in that we save more trees than the current ordinance. But every component is important, all 3. It can be difficult to follow, and I'm gonna do my best to make it clear, and please ask questions as we go along. We think that one of the things that would make the ordinance better would be some of the structure and the organization of it. Hopefully the city will figure out some of those structure major issues. But again, ordinances and zoning and all the tree ordinances can be difficult to follow, and you get better at it as you use it year after year. But there are some major things that could make it flow better, the proposed ordinance flow better. We think that maybe a user guide could help, or a summary that actually tells you how to complete the recompense and tree protection plans. So The next step for Trees Atlanta is that we are going to finalize a list to these 23 standards of amendments that we're proposing. And with that said, there's been a lot of organizations, individuals, other tree groups that have made an extensive list of changes they'd like to see. Some of our recommendations are identical. Some of them are similar and with some changes, and some of them may be completely different than other suggestions that we've heard. But I do want to say that everybody who's worked on this, we really do appreciate it. Every bit of time that gets spent working on the ordinance, we believe will improve it. And the city also has, I think, new suggestions that they are verifying and changing it as we go along as well. So again, our amendments include others, and we appreciate all the work that everyone else has done. I'm gonna go over this one more time. So our criteria for evaluation are these three pieces. Does it preserve more trees? What are the replanting standards? And recompense. How much recompense is being put in when trees are lost? We're going to compare the existing tree ordinance with the new tree ordinance. And what we're working on right now is trying to get different groups in architecture, landscape architecture firms, the city's evaluations of real projects where they're comparing them. And what we'd like to do is these field tests, put the data together and see what the ramifications are of the changes. And a lot of different groups and individuals have done tests, but the evaluation seems to be spread out. And we'd like to pull all the data in so that we can have one place where we can actually see where we're going with the proposed ordinance. So the last thing about these field test evaluations will both be in single family and commercial. A lot of the landscape architecture firms do more commercial development, whereas single family tends to be mostly the home builders and individual forestry groups and individuals. So Judy's going to talk about the impact chart and how we are doing this evaluation. Judy, you're on mute.
Based upon what Greg just described on how we evaluated our position on the current ordinance, we went in multiple directions to wrap our heads around it because it is complex due to the scope of changes and how each of the standards do touch upon each other. And that is by design because it is trying to leverage those three elements that Greg noted before, the preservation, the replanting, and the recompense. And at some point, each of those levers change and affect the other. So just to help us create a mental framework to start discussion and break it down in manageable bits, we created this impact chart. I will return to it, but just so that I can explain to you what you're looking at, allow me to move away from it for a second. So in that impact chart, it is designed much like a typical graph with axis. You'll see with the axis moving left to right on the horizontal line, it is a measure of the likelihood to protect or improve overall canopy. This is our assessment according to Trees Atlanta's mission. Is it aligned with our mission? Is it aligned with our philosophy and our expertise? So the more to the right it is more highly aligned and more likely to protect. The more it's on to the left, it decreases the likelihood. A similar kind of dimension is on the y-axis, which is the up and down axis, is our estimate of the policy impact. Some standards might not it might be neutral on a canopy impact directly, but it has a huge policy impact in the usability of the ordinance or implementation or public acceptance, for example. So that's what we're referring to as policy impact. The third element that you'll see on this graph is the size. There are bubbles that you saw. Some bubbles are bigger, some bubbles are smaller. This indicates purely the number of trees, for example, that we think will be impacted by that particular rule. Some things it's just the percentage of canopy that's going to be affected, or the pure number of trees we estimate might really be addressed by that particular standard. So although some things might be important, it just affects a fewer number of trees. Lastly, there are 3 colors that we will return to, but in the major definition is if you see yellow, it means that it is almost wholly okay. We agree with the intent and purpose and design of that standards. There's very nominal things for us to suggest. There are only a few of those. Then you'll see some blue dots. Those blue dots means they're generally correct, and we have some changes that we'd like to recommend, but not as much as the remaining dots that you'll see as white or a dotted white bubble. There we have more significant recommendations that we would see, and it must be included in amendments before it goes to vote in order for Trees Atlanta to believe that it is the overall ordinance is strong enough for us to give an endorsement. So in short, what we would like to see is when we return to the chart is that these bubbles, should these changes that we go over in the next few weeks actually get accepted, and I'm sure it might also go through a few more iterations and conversations with the parties involved, slowly these items could change colors and we could reevaluate where they belong on this matrix. So by that brief illustration, what we intend to do is taking each of these bubbles one by one, collaborate and negotiate on what benefits as many stakeholders as possible, and literally move them. And then by the end of this exercise, if more of these items are clustered toward the right and at the top of the list, it will give us more rationale and more evidence that the city's proposed ordinance is going to do what it's intended to do. Greg will go over more of the details following this, but at the end of the day, our intention is to use as much objective evaluation as possible with the field tests that are going to be coming in. But this is the framework of our discussion, and many of you guys might be invited to help us with each of these bubbles so we can have a rapid iteration to send specific amendments to the city. So today, with the time we have allowed, and we want to make sure that we address any questions that come up, Greg will discuss these 4 topics one at a time. And if there's anything that you would like for me to see, please put in the Q&A and I will be monitoring them. So now I will return to you, Greg. You're on mute.
If everybody can use the question and answer and not the chat, so we just have one format to follow, please. All right, so the first thing we're going to discuss, as you can see, Recompense allow for public trees, and it's a white circle with blue dots, meaning the changes are that we believe changes are necessary to improve tree protection outcomes. All right, so in the proposed ordinance, the city is consolidating the city planning and parks management of trees during development. So right now, the Parks Department is in charge of protecting the trees during construction in the right-of-way and in city property, and the city plan does private property protection during construction. In the proposed ordinance, they want to put it together, and we pretty much agree with this. We think it'd be a better way and a simpler way to protect trees. It also eliminates that duplicative permits managed by 2 departments. So it's good for the city, and we think it's good for trees. Another major piece is that right now, if you remove a tree on a public property through any development, it is an inch-per-inch replacement. The city wants to change that, and primarily we agree with it. The inch-per-inch is very punitive on public projects for the city, but also for the taxpayer. And it often pushes the planting of lots of trees, squeezing them in just to get your trees in. And the other issue is that it slows down some of these important infrastructure projects. And the city right now would like to change that to this basically the same as the private tree removal recompense formula. The other component is that linear infrastructure projects for the city, that they will further discount if it's a linear infrastructure project. So the difference between a linear infrastructure project is that it's more like a street project, a sewer line, sidewalks. Those are linear projects versus building a new school or doing removing trees at City Hall for beautification. Those aren't linear projects versus again, a water line or a sewer line project that's a city project. So our recommended amendments are that currently they say that any linear infrastructure project gets that discount. So whether it goes through a park or through a school, they get a discount. We believe that you should only get a discount if it's a linear project in the right of way, meaning along the sidewalk and street. And the reason for that is that if you're going through a bigger property, a public property, there are more choices and decisions on where you can move that sewer line or that linear infrastructure, whether it's sewer or gas. Whereas in the right of way, you don't have many choices. You really almost have to remove a lot of trees and probably do need a discount because there's not much choice in protecting trees. There just simply isn't. And the challenge here is that they've made a big change in that it was inch per inch and huge changes as far as replanting and replacement and a break on that, the city's cost on that. But to go all the way from inch per inch replacement and then go to basically a 50% discount than you're doing for private trees, that's a significant discount. But because they are in the right of way, they have fewer choice. We think maybe giving a discount somewhere between what they're suggesting and what the private recompense would be the right way to do it. So we're saying they want a 50% discount and to get it to 62, a 38% discount, which is basically paying 68% of the recompense value for trees that are removed versus what they're recommending now, which again is 50%. And again, it's a nuance, but a linear infrastructure project along the city street, fewer choices, removal in a big city property, you have more choices, you don't get that discount. But we do overall support changing inch per inch to the private tree recompense value. As you can see, that circle just moved to the right. It's just an example of the blue circle moving to the right and turning yellow, meaning it's a better likelihood of saving more trees. And it was not a major change, but it was a change that we think is needed. The next component of the ordinance that we're going to talk about are the priority tree definition. Now we're going to focus on definition here. Priority trees will be mentioned throughout our discussions over the next 4 weeks, but just to define a priority tree. Overall, we actually like the format. It starts to value different species and different sizes without getting overly complicated. We think it's a very good start, and I'm going to explain their definitions and talk about some recommendations that we are going to make. First of all, it's divided into 4 groups. These are 4 groups of priority trees, and they basically are evaluated on species and the minimum size of DBH. So basically, diameter at breast height, the minimum size where you can become a priority tree combined with the species. So group 1 has basically a list of shade trees, and they have to be 18 inches or greater in this proposed document to become a priority tree, which is a tree that the city pushes the protection of. You can see they're for the most part, these are slow growing trees that are in late succession, which means, obviously it takes a lot longer for them to replace. And also in late successional forests, you have generally have better soil. And those trees have to be 18-inch or greater. Again, 18-inch or greater in these particular species. The group 2 to be a priority species tend to be faster growing species and mid or early successional trees. You can see examples on this are trees like hackberry, water oak, and pines. Whereas in the group, you have to be 18 inches or greater, and group 1 are slower growing species like most oaks and beech trees. Again, 18 inches versus 24 inches. In group 3, these are priority trees only when there are no group 1 or group 2 trees. These are not going to be priority trees unless, again, there are no group 1 or group 2. These trees include trees like dogwood and persimmon and redbud. They only have to be 10 inches or greater, but again, they will not be a priority tree if you've got group 1 or group 2 on your site. Lastly, they have some, what they say is exotic trees. Southern magnolia is on the list. There's a little bit of argument, but they say basically it's not a Georgia Piedmont tree. They have ginkgo and deodora cedar as well. And those have to be 32 inches or greater to be considered priority trees. Of course, we probably rarely see a 32-inch ginkgo in Atlanta, but that's to be discussed. Next slide, Judy, please. Thank you. So in this priority trees definition, we want to make sure that everybody understands that in the proposed ordinance, they are still only regulating, basically considering trees to be saved as 12-inch pines and 6-inch hardwoods. That's the same as the current ordinance. That has not changed. Those are the only regulated trees. Again, priority trees are going to be grouped by species and size. As we saw before, an 18-inch beech tree would be considered a priority tree, whereas an 18-inch tulip poplar would not be, but a 24-inch tulip poplar would be. And again, all regulated trees are subject to recompense or replanting inches. If you're a regulated tree, you are subject to that. Our amendments are not very large, but we do believe we should reduce the significant threshold for priority trees in the group 1, which are the slower growing late successional trees, to 14 inches in caliper. A 14-inch caliper beech tree or white oak is about equivalent as a 24-inch tulip poplar in speed of growth in most situations. So we believe that should be reduced. We also know that there's some corrections that need to be made, such as bald cypress is in both group 1 and group 2, and maple is in group 1 is not the right maple. So you have box elder and silver maple, which are fast growing trees. I think we believe they mean to have sugar maple, possibly red maple, but sugar maple in that list. And there's a couple of other small changes. So if they make the changes here, then we would also move that circle, and I'm looking for it myself. There's the arrow on the priority definition to blue. Now we're going to talk about recompense value. So the recompense value that's being proposed is $240 per inch. Under the current formula, the a 20-inch beech or tulip poplar are treated the same. And as you saw before with the definition, a 20-inch beech tree would be a priority tree, and a 20-inch tulip poplar would not be. Currently, a either of these trees will be valued in this way in the current ordinance: $100 per stem plus $30 per inch at diameter breast height. Currently, that tree would be $100 plus the $30 times the 20 inches, which equals $700. A 20-inch beech tree or a tulip poplar has a $700 recompense. A 15-inch beech tree, which currently would not be a priority tree, would have a $100 plus $30 times 15 for a $550 recompense. Under the new proposed formula that the city is proposing, it would be, again, $240 times the diameter breast height, and they would only require replacement of 75% of the total inches. The city, as I understand it, the city's belief is that the increased improvement on planting techniques and the cost of that deserves a little bit of a, I guess, of a discount on replacing inches. So in this example, for a 20-inch tulip poplar, is 20-inch tulip poplar, I'm sorry, 20-inch beech, I correct myself, a 20-inch beech, you have $240 times the 20 inches times 75 or 75%, which is a $3,600 recompense. Again, you're only paying 75% of the inches, so that's why it's times 0.75, so 3,600. And the same formula for the tulip poplar, slightly different. They only make you replace 50% of the inches because it's a non-priority tree. The beech at 20 inches is a priority tree. The tulip poplar is not. So the city gives you only makes the removal of 50% of the total inches. So here you have $240 times the 20 inches diameter at breast height with the 50% of inches counted for $2,400. Now the 15-inch beech tree, which was a $550 under the past ordinance, would be done, the recompense would be done this way. $240 times the 15 inches, again, non-priority tree, you're only counting for 50% of those inches or a 50% discount, depending on how you want to look at it. So the value is $1,800. Now, if you look at the valuation from the current formula to the new formula, this is what it is. A 20-inch beech or tulip poplar is at $700 recompense under the current formulas in the ordinance, and the proposed formula for the removal of the 20-inch beech tree is $3,600, which is basically 5 times what it was. And the tulip poplar is closer to 3.5 times at $2,400 compared to the $700. And again, a non-priority beech tree, $550. The value now, with no further discounts, being 3 times or $1,800. Now, with this formula, there are other incentives and discounts that are available through meeting priority tree preservation standards, which we're going to go over in a second. But there's also other ways to get discount on the recompense, such as when you replant trees, you can take away the inches. If you plant 3 2.5-inch caliper trees, that comes from the total inches, I believe, of non-priority trees. And somebody may correct me on that piece. Next slide, please. Okay, so recompense with priority tree preservation with the standard incentive of a 50% reduction, meaning with the formulas you just saw, if you meet the priority tree preservation, you get a further discount or reduction of how many inches, actually a discount of your recompense. So in the current formula, as we saw, it was a $700 replacement value. Under the proposed formula, if you meet the priority tree preservation, this is what it would look like. Your 20-inch beech tree, if you preserved enough of the priority trees to meet the city standards, you would have a $240 times the 20 inches with the 75%, basically only having to replace 75% of the recompense trees for $3,600. If you look to the right, if you meet the priority, the preservation incentive, then you get a further discount of 50%, which makes it $1,800. So again, if you don't preserve enough priority trees, it's $3,600 for the beech tree, or $1,800 because you get a 50% discount because you met the preservation standard, which I'll talk about in a second. The 20-inch tulip poplar, same thing. If you, it's a non-priority tree, but if you meet at $2,400 without meeting the priority tree preservation, but if you meet the preservation of the priority trees, which I'll discuss in a second, you get a 50% discount on that as well for $1,200. Again, both these numbers are still greater than the current formula. The replacement value is about 3 times for the beech and 1.5 times for the tulip poplar. So the proposed ordinance increases the fee to $240 per inch from $30 per inch plus $100 DBH. They only require 75% replacement inches of the priority trees and 50% of the recompense for the non-priority trees. So basically, we look at it as a 25% discount or a 50% discount. Diameters at breast height, again, this is at diameters at breast height. They include several opportunities for discounting recompense and replanting requirements. Our recommended adjustment here would be to start off with full recompense of all inches if you have not met the ratio of protecting priority trees. So instead of starting off at 75%, you're starting off at 100%, and for non-priority trees at 75%. We also have another suggestion, and we're going to use a habitat home as an example. We believe that if you reduce your impervious surface by a certain percentage, that you should further get a discount in your recompense total. As an example, a habitat house tends to be somewhere between 35 to maybe 40% impervious surface, which is about a 30% discount lower than you're allowed in an R4 zoning. If you reduce your impervious surface, we believe you should, to a certain percentage, we believe that you should get a discount. This helps in obviously creating smaller homes. It helps in homes that are being that are more economical and smaller, like habitat homes, that they get a discount. And less impervious surface helps trees. Basically, it protects more trees because you're not covering soil with concrete and impervious materials. But also it protects trees down our streams and creeks by letting less stormwater flood those systems. So we believe that we should be giving an incentive, a carrot, for reducing your impervious surface. We don't have exact numbers. We kind of have the sense of what we think it should be. Again, reducing your allowed impervious surface by 30% should increase the amount of recompense that you have to pay. So you can see the circle is turned gold. We believe that the recompense value should be moved to gold with these changes. Again, it's possible that if we get enough assessments of the current proposed ordinance that show that they are preserving enough trees and the tree ordinance is working without these changes, we may be open to it without major changes. But right now, we do not see enough data and do not see enough tests that would gain our support that's showing the ordinance works. And as I said earlier, a lot of people have been testing it on properties, residential more than commercial at this point. But until we see a compiled data showing that it's preserving more trees, we want to see more of these changes. The next piece is site density that we're going to be discussing in the next slide. And site density depends on lot size in the proposed ordinance. You can see to the right, they have different size lots and what is required for site density. You also will see priority tree preservation standards, what % of the trees you have to save, or you're supposed to save if you're going to get the incentives, and an alternate maximum disturbance area if you do not save enough priority trees. We're going to discuss that in another day, but basically if you don't meet the priority tree preservations, you will have to meet the alternate maximum disturbance area. But we're going to talk about site density here. Now, site density used to be on the previous ordinance about how much diameter breast height, inches you were saving. Now they're going to a quantity of trees. Overall, we do support this, and mainly because you could have one tree that you're saving and then not have to replant any trees at all. But an example for R4, as R4, for the most part, lots zoned R4 tend to be about 10,000 square feet, and most of them would fit under the medium lot size. And my house, and maybe many of your houses, are in the R4. It's typically a 50-foot lot by 200, 10,000-ish square feet. In that situation, it's 21 trees per acre that have to be saved. So that are saved or planted. So in a quarter acre lot, you would have to plant or save 5 trees. Now, just a little bit about, I'm not going to go over it too much, but tree preservation and planting standards for single family residential development, again, have other discounts, incentives, but I kind of discussed that. They apply, well, I'm not going to go over that. Sorry, I'm just going to confuse myself. But again, the difference in this proposal is that they're not going for inch, but upon stems that are being removed. And as we talk about this, the replacement trees to meet site density must be mid or overstory trees and be over 6 inches, or if they're pines, over 12 inches to be included as a tree preserved. They must have invasive vines removed. And it doesn't apply to small renovations that do not remove priority trees. And I guess part of that is the land disturbance less than 1,000 square feet. Our recommendation, we primarily support this part of the ordinance change. The only recommendation is that we would like to see a slight increase on trees preserved per acre. We're finishing that chart, but it would, for a residential R4, we believe that it should be about 6 trees versus 5. You can see that the site density has turned gold at the top, and that means that with those changes, we are very supportive in site density. All right, so now we're going to go over some scenarios here. If you had a lot, basically with a certain amount of trees, we're going to go over what it would look like. In this example, we're going to go over basically 3 different scenarios of tree removal in this example. And it is a R4 lot that is about a 10,000 square feet lot. And that means you have to save 60% of the priority trees to get the discount of your recompense. And in the alternate maximum disturbance area is 50% of the site, which I'm not going to go over too much, but basically that means you cannot disturb more than 50% of the site if you do not save 60% of the priority trees. So it's one or the other. And then of course, site density is 21 trees per acre, which means you have to save 5 trees. I'm sorry, you have to have 5 trees per that quarter acre lot. In this example, we have 5 existing trees, and 3 of them are priority trees. Sorry. There's 5 trees and 2 of them are being removed. And that would mean that you would need to plant 2 trees. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I apologize. So you have 5 existing trees and they're proposing removing 2 of them. So you're down to 3 trees. You would have to replant 2 trees. In this example, if you go to the bottom of the page here, what we're looking at is a removal of a 34-inch pecan tree. This is a real lot that we're taking a look at, and a 12-inch hackberry. Again, current recompense would be $100 per stem plus $30 times the DBH. So for the pecan, you would have $100 plus $30 times 30-inch caliper inches, which comes out to $1,120. That's under the current ordinance. And the hackberry would be $460. Again, $100 plus 30 times 12 inches, which equals 460. The total recompense under the current ordinance is $1,580. Okay, so scenario A would be under the new ordinance, and it is looking at if you had a total, again, of 3 priority trees and 2 non-priority trees for a total of 5 trees, and 1 priority tree was removed and 1 non-priority tree is removed, which means you're preserving 2 and 2 priority trees and preserving 1 non-priority tree. Now, again, the priority standard, the standard for preserving priority trees on this quarter-acre lot is saving 60% of the trees. So in this example, by preserving 2 trees out of 3, you're preserving more than 60%. So you're meeting the minimum priority tree preservation. So you're meeting that, which means you will get some incentives for meeting that requirement. So in this example, they've achieved it. They've achieved the priority tree preservation. So you have a 34-inch tree that's being removed. You have $240 times that 34 inches. You only have to, in the current ordinance proposal, new ordinance, you have to only only do recompense for 75% of those inches. So you get a 75% discount. 25% discount. So you're only paying 75%. But you get a further discount because you met the priority trees. So again, I'm gonna go over this one more time because it is a lot to take in. You have $240 per inch. You have a 34 inches that are being removed. You get a 25%, you only pay recompense for 75% of the total inches, which basically is a 25% discount. But because you meet priority tree preservation, you get another 50% discount. So that's $240 times 34 times 0.75 and then times another 0.5. So that recompense for that 1 pecan is $3,060. Now the 12-inch hackberry is not a priority tree, but they did meet the preservation priority of priority trees. So in this example, you have $240 times the 12-inch hackberry. It's not a priority tree, so you only have to pay 50% of the inches, and you get another 50% discount, which makes the hackberry replacement value only $720. That's a total of $3,780. But as we saw before, the recompense for both trees, which is not on here, was much less than that. Basically, in this requirement, they preserved 2 trees. They worked around 2 priority trees, saved the 60%, and got a discount, a further discount. The current recompense is right there. Under the current ordinance, the recompense is $1,580. And under the new scenario, when you preserve over 60% of priority trees, the recompense is but it's $3,780. It is still 2.5 times what it was. And you're preserving 60% of the priority trees. This next example is going to show if you did not meet preserving 60% of the priority trees. This example shows that you removed 2 out of 3 of the priority trees, meaning you preserved only 1. And the non-priority trees, again, you saved 1 out of 2 of the priority trees. Under this circumstance, you will have to do the alternate maximum disturbance area, which means you will not be allowed to disturb more than 50% of the site. But you have taken out 2/3 of the priority trees. In this example, you have to, this is the way the formula works. If you look to the left, in the green, you have a 34-inch pecan, which is which is $240 times the 34-inch pecan. The city right now is saying you only have to pay 75% of those inches, which is a total of $6,120. This is greater because you did not meet the preservation incentive. You do not get the further discount. It is 2 pecans that we're losing, so it's times 2, which is a total of $12,240. So in this scenario where you did not save the priority trees, you notice there is no further discount. The hackberry is $240 times the total inches of the hackberry, which was 12 inches. And the city, for non-priority tree, says you only have to replace 50% of those inches, which is a total of $1,440. Again, on this example, they did not meet the preservation incentives. And so 2 things here: they've increased the recompense to $13,680, from which the current recompense was $2,700. Now, the other thing, again, remember the alternate maximum disturbance is only 50%. So that is going to save more trees, and that you can only disturb 50% of the total soil on an R4, in this R4 scenario. Again, current recompense, $2,700. The scenario where you lose 2 priority trees, $13,680. Now, people will argue that's not enough to save, for people to, developers to save trees, because it's just a small number. That is something that we have to evaluate, and why we are going to make a different recommendation. But do remember that they now have to meet the alternate maximum disturbance area, which means 50% of the lot cannot be disturbed. Is this the next slide? Yes, it is. Scenario C. In this scenario, it's a minor change. They're meeting the priority standards of saving trees, but they're not meeting. They're not saving any of the non-priority trees. So they're basically having to replace, have to pay for the replacement of 2 non-priority trees. Again, if you're looking at it on the right, you have the 34-inch pecan, $240 times 34 inches, with the only having to pay the replacement of 75% of those inches, and you still get the 50% discount. Looks like this: $240 times 34 times the only having to do recompense for 75% of the total recompense, and you get a 50% discount for 3. So the tree recompense is $3,060. And the reason why they're getting the discount, the 50% discount, is because they preserved 2 out of 3 of the priority trees. So if you had 3 pecan trees at 30 inches, they had to preserve 2 of them. They did this, they get a further discount. The non-priority trees also get discounted. You have $240 times the 12 inches, because there's 2 hackberries at 12 inches. And they only have to do recompense because it's a non-priority tree for 50% of the total inches. And then the city is proposing a 50% discount again because they met the preservation of 60% of the priority trees. It is 2 trees, so it's $720 times 2, $1,440 recompense. In this scenario, where you removed more of the non-priority trees, but saved enough of the priority trees, you are paying $4,500 in recompense, and the current recompense and the current standards is $2,040. You're still paying double the recompense, and you're preserving 2 out of 3 of the priority trees.
So Greg, one of the things that I would like to add to these samples is the people who are more familiar with the new proposed formula will note that we did not do the math for replanted trees. Of course, in brief, when you replant trees to meet the minimum site density and hopefully exceed that, you do get credit for the inches replanted. Just because it's complex already, we wanted to be able to clarify the dynamics of what happens when you choose to save priority trees versus not. That was the main takeaway from these scenarios. So a full demonstration of all the math that goes into calculating total recompense owed is a little more detailed, and we might get to that at the future webinars, but we wanted to save that complexity for later. So that is the scenarios that we wanted to demonstrate to give a sense of how the ordinance is influencing or giving people option of doing one or the other. We know that some of the options have different temperatures around that, but taken as a whole with the early field tests that Greg and other professionals have been doing and collecting, and we'll share with you once we have those results, it seems to indicate that it does provide compelling decisions for those permit holders to do one or the other. As those 3 scenarios showed, it can be a rather radical difference. I'm going to do a time check. We only have about 2 or 3 minutes left on this webinar. I've been monitoring the Q&A, and there wasn't a huge material questions regarding the content, except for the question was asked, will we share the recording? I think we will we'll make the deck available, and then we might have to clean up the recording to make it a little more concise, and we'll share that too. And then we'll return to some of these principles in the next weeks as we add on to all these standards. Greg, are there any other clarifying statements you want to make?
No, we're doing our best to make it as clear as possible. And if you have any questions, please do ask us this. And we look forward to moving forward. And in the end, we want to make sure that enough of the amendments happen so the city can continue to move forward and hopefully gain our support for the new ordinance. But if we can get enough data showing it's working as is, then we may be able to support it without the amendments. But putting all that data together is going to take a lot of energy and time because you work with a lot of different partners. Okay, so I would like to remind you there are a number of standards that still remain to be discussed. We isolated these 4 so that you have a baseline to understand all the other that will layer on top of that. So if you have any questions on those primary kind of concept, which is what's a priority tree and the design of how recompense value will impact those decision-making factors, along with that basic fundamental rule for every single-family development site, which is site density rule that stems on property. The similar concepts will return when we discuss commercial development. The numbers will be different, but the concepts will be the same. So I hope that this has been useful. And before you leave, if you would answer one more poll, if we can get rid of this. If you could help us
Great. If I can get it to go.
And Judy, I think people are asking who's participating. Did you answer that? I mean, you can go to the participants.
No,
At least I can.
Oh, yeah, because you're a panelist.
Oh.
So I cannot get the second poll to launch, but I hope that this has been a helpful webinar. If you want us to give us feedback, actually, it would be very helpful. If you have comments or ideas on what seemed to be helpful, what points that we might not have addressed, but will help you better understand what the city is offering, and what you need from us to take it to the level of understanding that would be critical for your understanding, that would be helpful for us. So thank you for your time. Greg?
Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate everybody's hard work on this. And as much as we can help clarify how we understand the ordinance, and we're open to still hearing if our amendments need some more thought, we're still open to hearing about that and possibly changing our amendments as well. Judy, were you able to figure out a way to share the participants?
No, it's because it's a webinar.
Okay.
It can't be. But if you guys have a specific need for a list, I'll be happy to take it offline. So send me a note by email. That would be great. So thank you so much. I'm going to end this webinar, and hopefully if you register for this webinar, you're automatically registered for each of the 3 remaining weeks. So I hope to see you back next Thursday. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.